Well, hello, and thanks for joining us on the Village Online. I am so glad that you are with us today. I get to talk to one of my favorite people on the planet and somebody you're going to fall in love with. If you haven't met him yet, you're going to fall in love with him through this interview. Matt Neylon is an incredible individual who wears many hats. He's a passionate worship leader. He is the worship leader of the Village Church, so you have seen the tall, handsome man. That's Matt. He's also the director of visual and performing arts at the Mount Vernon School. Matthew's journey is both inspiring and profound. Raised in an evangelical family, Matthew faced the challenge of reconciling his deep faith with his identity as a gay Christian. Not an easy thing for everyone to do. Despite the hurdles, he has navigated his path with grace, resilience, and an unwavering belief in the power of love. In our conversation today, we're going to dive into Matthew's experiences from his role as a worship leader and arts director to his personal journey of acceptance and love. And I think I'm going to learn some things about Matt that I haven't known prior, and you're going to fall in love with him. So sit back and relax and join us as we uncover the story of Matthew Neylon. Matt, thank you so much for being with us.
It's so great to be here. And Ray, I remember the very first time I met you, you came up to me and extended your hand and said, it's an honor to meet you, because you knew I was coming with Alejandro. And that has stuck with me. I've used that, and I just think the way you welcome people is really beautiful. So that welcome was incredible.
Well, it is sincere. You're really one of my favorite people, and so I'm so excited. I've wrote a lot of questions, and I want us just to go. And if we get to a cutting off point, we may turn this into 2 weeks, and we'll just keep going, because I want people to know about you, and I have some things I've been dying to know too. Can you share first a little bit about your upbringing and how your evangelical background kind of shaped your faith journey? Because that was important. That's been important to you.
Yeah, I had a wonderful childhood. I mean, in so many ways, it was, we were very humble as a family, but I didn't know that. It's summertime here in Atlanta, and I remember in summer in Chicago, we had this tall privacy fence that my dad had built, and we would put a hose through the fence, and it was going to the water park. We would, just put on our bathing suits and run around with this hose, and we thought that was the best thing ever. I had two little brothers. I remember I was 2 years old when my middle, the middle one of us was born, but I was 5 when our youngest, Stephen, was born, and we would watch Full House. There were only so many TV shows, you could watch as an evangelical family back then,
right.
But Full House was one of them. And one of the girls, DJ, had a boyfriend named Steve. And I just thought he was the coolest guy on Full House. And I thought, man, I hope I have a brother named Steve. Well, I didn't realize my parents were already thinking about that name for my brother, Stephen. And they brought him home and they said, oh, it's Stephen. I thought, they picked my name. So that was the day, the 5 of us. It's been 5 ever since. And we eventually, my dad worked for the police department, the state police department. They moved us out to a suburb because they wanted good schools, and, they were doing the best they could. And so we grew up in this really great suburb outside of Chicago and had kind of like an idyllic childhood. Church was always a really big deal because both my parents were raised Irish Catholic. And so they didn't totally connect with the Catholic faith. And right around the time I was born, both my parents were born again. That may be a phrase that's gone out of style, but they went from Catholicism to Protestant and found a really beautiful church, a lot of ethnicities at the church. I remember there were flags all around the sanctuary because the main lead pastor was white, but the music pastor was black, and the pastoral guy was from India. So we had just this really beautiful combination of people at the church, and that's how I grew up. I remember asking my mom, why do they call that boy black if he's brown? And really was a place where I started to learn different styles of music and singing. At like 2 years old, I was probably singing, and we know gospel music is a great way to come up and experience not only worship, but different sounds, different chords, different harmonies and tonalities. And I think that's why from a young age, I was really drawn to music. When we moved out to the suburbs, I had a great music teacher. The week we moved out there, it was auditions for the school play, Johnny Appleseed. And I remember we had auditions, and the teacher said, when you said you wanted it, when you raised your hand and said you wanted to audition, she said, I was nervous because you were the new kid. I was kind of awkward. I know it's hard to believe. I'm still pretty awkward, but I came up and sang, and I got the role of Johnny Appleseed. And my mom picked me up from school, and I said, I got in the show. And she said, okay, great. That's my parents didn't know. They weren't, they grew up in Chicago public schools. Right. It wasn't a music program.
Right.
So they were very supportive of me wanting to sing. And one thing led to another. And when it came time to look at colleges, the idea was, do I want to perform? Do I want to teach? Because those were kind of the options. When you grow up in Chicago, you can be a policeman, a fireman, or a teacher.
Right.
Mom was a teacher, dad was a policeman, and I knew I had no business fighting fires. So I thought about the musicians in my life. All the directors or performers were kind of gruff, mean, the industry's pretty rough. And all my teachers were the most inspiring, joyful people in the world. And so I thought, I want to be a teacher. Like, sign me up for that. So I went into teaching and had some really great mentors in college and got my music ed degree, did my student teaching on the south side of Chicago. And then right after that, I'm telling you, like the day before graduation, I got an email from a school in Rockford, Illinois, which is like way out there, a Christian school. And I remember in music school, they kind of train you to believe, you're going to start elementary, because there's a lot of elementary schools. And then for every 10 elementary schools, there's one middle school. So when the middle school teacher retires, you can fight for that job. And then maybe 10 years later, when the high school teacher dies, you can fight for that job. And so I kind of was ready for that type of trajectory. And this school said, hey, we've got a high school program, middle and high school. We want you to be the theater director, choral director, teach AP music theory, theater classes. And I was like, this is the dream. I thought I wasn't going to be here till I was in my 30s. And I was 21 because I was young for my grade, and teaching, the kids who were held back in kindergarten, finished the year at 19 years old. So here I am, 21, teaching, 12 through 19-year-olds. And that was kind of how things got started for me, being a teacher. And I've been in education ever since. I actually recently have moved into a role where I'm doing a lot of hiring of teachers. And so now I'm working on the HR talent side of the house and trying to keep good teachers in education, because we all know right now with the landscape of things, got a lot of teachers leaving the field.
Oh, yeah.
It's easier to make money doing something remote, and teaching work for the most part is not remote work. You got to be there with the kids in person.
So because like I see you as someone who has a very vibrant, very enlightened faith. When you look back at you as a teenager, was that a strong pull for you? Because I know some people, they go to church, their family goes to church, it's kind of what they do. But was that really a part of did people say Matt Neylon, he loves Jesus, he goes to church, that's kind of his thing?
We were always in church, and I was one of the things my parents really taught me from a young age was that you can depend on God, and God is consistent. And I never doubted my faith. Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir came to Chicago one time. I remember them performing at Moody Bible Church.
Right.
And we went as a family, and there was one song they sang, and the lyric was, I never lost my hope, I never lost my joy, but most of all, I never lost my faith. And later on, when I was reconciling my own sexuality, I remember that song coming back, and I remember thinking, I have lost hope, and I have lost joy. But I never really lost my faith that there was a God who loved me. And I feel very privileged, because I think a lot of people, around the time I was coming out, I was also finding the village. So I got to walk from a non-affirming environment right into an affirming environment. Everybody has that.
I was wondering about, like, as a teenager, kind of how when did orientation become for you something that you were thinking about? What did you do with it? Is it just I'm maybe bi-curious for a while and I don't know?
I can tell you both sides of the equation. When I was a teenager, I didn't always, we had Awanas and youth group and all these things, and I didn't click with the group. at the time, I attributed it to like I was weird. I was a music kid. I wasn't a church kid. A lot of the kids in my church were homeschooled and they could memorize all these verses. Now I look back and I realized I was a queer kid. I didn't fit in because I was different. But that was so far from my mind. In that time, I was just weird. I was different. I was quirky. I was a music kid and I just didn't fit in. So I didn't really want to be in church. I would come sometimes because I could play piano and I would like play with the youth group band. And then I remember one time the youth group leader saying, you all need to be sold out to Christ. And some of you only come when we invite you to play in the band. And he was talking to me. And after that, I really never wanted to go back. But I was always in church. I just never clicked with like the youth. It was a very cool thing at the time. If you went into a youth group in the 90s, they were probably playing Creed or Three Doors, what was I can't remember. But there were these certain bands and, I wasn't that kind of kid. I was the weird choir kid and I just didn't fit in. Later on, when I graduated college, I started doing a lot more with evangelical churches and I started to fit in a lot more. And I for a while, was deep in that world. But
you were even part of worship team at like a fairly renowned church, right? A big mega church.
Really, really big churches that I was a part of. At one point, I was a part of what was called the fastest growing church in America. Right. We had taken over a mall and there was another mega church in town and I sang at both. And that was kind of taboo. They didn't like that I was at both churches. But within 2 weekends, I was probably worshiping with 12 or 15,000 people. And so at that point, I had kind of grown into the evangelical piece. But it was very I never really felt connected. I never felt good enough. I never felt pure enough, like whether it was because I swore or because, I'd done something that I felt was wrong. I never really felt like I connected the way I wanted to. I never felt like I read my Bible enough. I never prayed enough. And there was just something off. And I made a lot of excuses for it in my mind. But now, looking back, now that I can diagnose, it's easier to look back. I was just a gay kid and I was never going to fit in that world.
Right. So you come to Atlanta for a job.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you begin to kind of deal or face the orientation or maybe become more aware of what's going on?
Yeah. So the school I had worked at Illinois was a covenant school. And you had to sign, I believe, I will not. And so it was really clear what I wasn't allowed to do. So I was not even entertaining the idea that I wasn't straight. I dated women and in my mind, that was the only option. I was a Christian. This is what it was. When I moved here, not only was the school I was working for not a covenant school, but it's a bigger city, a lot more people, and just my world became a lot bigger. So on the one hand, the reason I moved to Atlanta, started looking at jobs down here, I had taken a group from Illinois to Florida, and we had stopped at some of the mega churches in town on the way. And I was like, wow, Atlanta's cool. Because my only view of Atlanta was these 2 mega churches that most people would probably know of. And so when I moved down here, I started going to one of them. So I had that piece of my life on Sundays. And then I think it was Monday nights, I went to the symphony chorus and I was in the symphony. And let me tell you what, a lot of LGBT folks in the symphony chorus.
Right.
So I'm going out with that group of people, learning a culture and learning what it means to be in a group of people that are LGBT and open about it and cool with it and no stigma. And then I'm in one of the most conservative evangelical churches. Right. And that's when I really had to look those 2 things in the face and go, which group am I a part of? And really start to figure it out. Because in my head, you really couldn't do both. And I had to start asking some questions about, who am I? What side am I on?
Were you thinking things like, if I am gay, then I can't be a Christian? Is that part of the process? I know for many it is, and I didn't know if that would have been kind of the way you were having to process it too.
Yeah, it was not an option. I think the belief I had growing up was you make choices. Everything you do is a choice, and you either choose God, you choose the narrow path, you choose the right thing, or you don't. You choose something else and you choose sin. And in my head, for whatever reason, I'm not going to say, where it came from, but I had this idea that LGBT was sin, and it was just a non-option because, like I said, when all else went wrong, I was a Christian. I believed there was a God that loved me. I believed I had prayed a prayer of salvation and that nothing could ever take that away from me. So I really did not even think of that. My sexuality was secondary to, my faith. It wasn't even really something I thought about at all. And when I had to start thinking about it, that's when I was like, oh, like what is this? What could this be? I really, like I said, it sounds silly now. And people who know me are like, you have been gay since the day you were 5 years old wearing your grandma's heels and pearls at Christmas, But at the time, I just want to empathize with those folks out there who, when it's not an option in your head, it's almost like a flavor of ice cream you've never tried.
Yeah.
You don't know it's something until, you have these desires, you look at somebody and you think, wow, they look really good, but you don't even have a name to put with it because there's just never been something that's been an option.
I love hearing this because your story is a little different. The way you're framing it, it's not somebody that at 12 was aware of this orientation issue. And so that's very interesting. So you're in Atlanta. How do you, and Alejandro, how does that connection happen?
Yeah. So I had a moment, I've always been kind of justice oriented. I was born on the south side of Chicago. I did my student teaching on the south side of Chicago. And I've always had a heart for marginalized groups. So I had found a group through this evangelical church that was doing a lot of outreach. We were going to Safe House. There was a school we had partnered with, and I was kind of the point person over on the west side. And we were doing like an after-school music program, and we were going to Guatemala, and we were doing all this amazing work trying to help, just be the love of Jesus in these different places. There were 6 nonprofits we worked with, anyone from orphans to, people who were caught up in different things. And I remember as I was trying to figure some things out, the leader of that group called me and said, hey, we heard you might be, experimenting, exploring, figuring some things out. And I just want to let you know, he did it in a very kind way, but he said, you really can't lead the school group on the west side if you're pursuing a gay lifestyle. And that's the way he said it at the time. And that was the moment that I really had to reconcile the two. I'd been able to keep these things separate for so long. Even when I was in Illinois, I could be, in the bar, hugging somebody, kissing a guy, and on stage at church, and totally separate my lives.
Right.
But, and like I said, here in Atlanta, I had my symphony friends, my gay friends, and I had my church friends. Right. But the moment somebody said, you can't minister to children, I was literally putting African drums in the backseat of my car and driving an hour from Sandy Springs to the west side during rush hour traffic to teach kids worship songs. And someone was saying, you can't do that if you're gay. It was the first time that I was like, I've really got to figure this out. Because I really think, I know I am attracted to men, but what I'm doing is for kids. I mean, this is like, I'm trying to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And so that was the first time. And I realized that is a very privileged place, that like the first time I really had to put those two things on the couch together, we're at almost 30 years old. Most people have to confront these things way earlier in life, but I'd been shielded from a lot of it. And that was the moment that I said, something is up. So I was testing out different churches, not testing, but, they talk about church shopping. And I had a lot of friends that were music ministers. So somebody invited me to come help with worship up in a church up north. And a friend of mine checked me in on Facebook. I know the younger generation doesn't do check-ins anymore. They're not cool.
Is that not cool? Dang, I just am catching on to this thing.
I got checked in at this church, and I had been connected to someone on Facebook named Alejandro, but we never had chatted. It's just one of those things. People friend each other, and if they don't look crazy, you say yes, right? So we never chatted, and it popped up because this church was only a couple miles from his house. And he messages me, hey, is that an affirming church? And that was the first time I'd ever heard that term.
Wow.
And I said, I don't know what that means, but I'd love to learn. I'd love to talk about it, because I kind of knew I had to get out of this evangelical world thing. It just wasn't working. And so he said, okay. And so I texted, like, let's find time, let's have dinner. Are you available tonight? Well, he was reading a book, put the phone down. And a couple hours later, looked at it and was like, oh gosh, okay, sure. Because, little did I know, he's been doing this work with, different churches and the LGBT community for years. So he picked up the phone just in time before I had made any dinner and said, yeah, let's find somewhere in between you and me. And we met up in Roswell, and the rest is history, I guess you could say.
So he becomes your teacher and begins to explain a little bit about how churches can be affirming and how they don't see someone's orientation as a disqualifier of them teaching marginalized children worship songs. That had to just be eye-opening.
Yeah, it was like when Dorothy comes out in Munchkin Land and the world is in color, because just him talking through that, I work with LGBT people all the time because I loved LGBT people. I didn't think they were bad people because I grew up in music. And so I always had friends who were in the LGBT community. I just, for some reason, had compartmentalized, I can't, and that isn't for me. I'm not allowed to. It's that I'm a Christian. And so when he starts talking about LGBT people who are Christians and churches where they're, accepted and open, and how he's helping people translate books so folks around the world, because remember, I was traveling to other countries. I have a heart for these different groups of people, and he's doing this work, the same country I'm going to try to teach about Christ and economic empowerment and all these things. He's translating a book about being affirming an LGBT into Spanish and shipping to that country. And everything was just like, wow. I remember the first day I got glasses as a kid. It felt like the world had been outlined in Sharpie marker. That's what it felt like. It was just all these things that were fuzzy and overlapped, but not in focus, all of a sudden made a lot more sense.
How many years ago?
5 years ago.
5 years ago.
We met on June 17th of 2020.
The anniversary. That's right around the corner. And
yeah.
Sunday, I guess. So had he started coming to the village yet, or was the village?
So Alejandro invited me to the village.
So that's the next week. So y'all come the very next week to the village. So you're about to have your 5th anniversary, walking through our doors. That it blows my mind, because you would come from all of that you just walk through our door. We were a car dealership, kind of, a garage. You'd been symphonies and all that kind of stuff, but you felt something that was good. You felt it right away.
When it comes to worship, I was singing at a lot of churches and helping out at a lot of churches, but I didn't really have that evangelical on stage thing. That was more my Illinois life. I actually started attending a big mega church here in Atlanta because I knew they would never ask me to do worship, and I was kind of burnt out.
Right.
And so I was kind of ready to be more plugged in. It's amazing. You can go to a huge church and kind of just melt into
melt and hide, yeah.
And I had found a community in that group of folks who were doing the nonprofit work, but at the church, I was really a number, even as a volunteer. This is a place that had 300 to 500 volunteers a week. And so you're really just part of a big sea of people, which at the time I appreciated. But at the village, it felt like folks knew my name. Like I mentioned, you came up to me, and several folks introduced themselves and seemed to care that I was there and knew who I was. And I remember Neil taking a picture of Alejandro, and I had my head on his shoulder, and that was something that was like celebrated and not like weird.
I don't think I realized. I love the picture. I didn't know. Yeah. I'd forgotten that was the first Sunday.
I don't know if it was the first,
but it was early. It was early, wasn't it?
It was only a couple months after that leader had told me, you can't be a leader of a group and be pursuing an LGBT lifestyle. And then 8 weeks later, I've got my head on my boyfriend's shoulder in church. That was a 180 moment for me.
That is amazing. I'm so happy. And we talk about church, and it's the reason that I really love that we gather every Sunday. And I know some people have moved in their life that's never been a part of their life, or they've moved away from gathering in a weekly way, and no judgment. But I love that moment happened for you. I think about Olivia coming into our church, and Olivia had been a worship leader. Her story, had been a worship leader as a young lesbian, closeted, didn't know, outed, gets fired from her job, is hurt so badly, doesn't know that the Jesus road is ever going to be a road she can walk. And somebody tells her about the village, and she comes to church, and she looks up on the stage, and she sees you, and she sees Alejandro, and she suddenly feels like she's home. These are people that love God, because there was never a question. You loved God. You were serving, wanting to be that's why I just wish everybody could get to know you, could know Alejandro, could know the wonderful people that we know, and could see that you guys have a vibrant faith that I am in awe of. Anyway, I know I'm supposed to ask questions.
As different people are exploring this term of deconstruction, as you start to really take the parts and pieces of your faith apart. I think about if I went to a restaurant and got like a deconstructed, this is popular now.
Right.
Deconstructed hamburger.
Oh, yeah.
And there's the patty, and there's a piece of lettuce.
That's a weird thing. I've never been able, I see the pictures. I don't understand it.
You sort of build it yourself.
Right.
When I take apart the parts of my faith and the church community growing up, we mentioned the music. Music's wonderful. It's a wonderful way to connect with people. And the community, whether it's that church that had all these flags in different nations when I was a little kid, or the village where you meet every different kind of person from every different walk of life. There's so many, I think people just think church is going to learn about Jesus. That's certainly a piece of the puzzle, but you can also do that at home.
Right.
And I think if COVID taught us anything, that can't be the only ingredient.
That's it.
Church has got to be about the folks, the experience, the music, the fellowship, because Alejandro and I read the Bible all the time at home. That's not the only reason we go to the village, although you definitely say things in a way it always challenges us to think about it in a new way.
I was impressed, and it all makes sense to me now. I don't think I realized that you had always had this marginalized people heart. And so that helps me understand the connection, some of the connection. But I remember I would see you guys out with new people all the time. I would see you make friends with new people at the church, and suddenly you guys are sitting at the pizza restaurant with them on Sunday, or I think about Jacob, and Jacob comes into our church, and one of the best young guys I've ever known, but y'all befriended him. Y'all became his friend, kind of like two big brothers that are just helping him process some things. It has been one of the most beautiful things to me. And a few years ago, when I was wondering, is my time up as far as, I've been doing this a long time, maybe we're at a different season of life. Maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe there's somebody, but your affirmation of me and Alejandro's affirming of me and saying, Ray, you're doing a good work. This is a powerful, good thing. That has meant the world to me. And it got me through a little depression period I went through, where now it's like, I want to do this until the day that I die. And I want to see those aha moments when a Matthew comes through the doors, or an Olivia comes through the doors, or someone who is as straight as a board comes through the door and says, oh, this is a beautiful thing. This feels like the kingdom of God. This feels like this is just a beautiful, diverse thing. I love that so much.
Yeah, I love when I meet people at the village who are totally straight couple, but they're like, we would never want to be anywhere that our siblings couldn't be.
I love that
or
too.
that our children, if they happen to be LGBT, couldn't be comfortable. And it really does feel like this is what the village has, and what you created is a need. And so I'm so thankful that you stuck in through the hills and valleys of it all, because I think back to that worship environment you were asking about when I was a teenager, where I just didn't fit in. I didn't know the Creed songs that were playing when I walked in, and I wasn't good at dodgeball and basketball, and I didn't fit.
Yeah.
We don't want anyone to feel that way.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's easy to connect with people and have lunch and have pizza, because I love that the village is a place where you don't have to fit in or feel like you're in the in crowd to feel loved and accepted and at home. Because I do think there are a lot of environments where you're well-meaning. They're trying to create something that's very cool and very, going to attract new people. But in the process, I think some other folks feel left out, and it tends to be folks from those different marginalized groups.
When you're talking about that, I'm thinking back to when we had the big numbers in youth group, and truthfully, a lot of it was built around, we had some athletes in our church, and they were kind of the popular kids in school. And I look back and I think, God, we were so unaware that the kid that felt a little awkward, but I love where we are now, where just about anybody could come in and they're going to be loved and honored and for who they are. They don't have to be self-confident, and they can be just who they are, and they're going to be sought out, and we're going to care about them, and we're going to want to know their name, and we're going to want to know their story, and we're going to honor their story. Whatever their story is, we're going to honor it. And that's you're helping me see that is a beautiful picture. I like that.
Well, this is any business, right? I remember even when I was starting my choral program at 21 years old, people told me, if you have the popular kids, you'll have a successful program.
I've heard it.
Because that's where people
I've heard it.
Right? Churches have adopted this model.
They sure have.
If you have the popular or rich.
Because if you start with the other way, you're never going to get you got to have that draw. You got to have that popular kid.
And so that is a dangerous model when, your popularity is built on a few people with a lot of influence or a lot of money or a lot of power, because they're going to attract lots and lots of folks. And then guess what? I was pretty keen on making sure those popular kids stayed in my choir. Right. I would imagine pastors of giant churches that function like big corporations have to be pretty keen on keeping those few influential folks in their church. But what's amazing is, now I think about the group of students that I have. I don't have a gigantic choral program. I still have a little vocal group, and there's nowhere else they would fit in but with each other in this context. This is the only place they feel like they can really be themselves. And I would much rather have a group of folks that absolutely need a place to fit in that wouldn't fit in anywhere else than to have tons of people that could fit in anywhere. Because one is a need and one's a nice to have, right?
Right.
I think about the ministry of Jesus. His crew wasn't popular kids.
Right. It's so funny how that becomes the model, and we teach it in seminary. We teach it in church growth classes. Yes. You're taught that. It's like, wonder if we ever thought about that's not the way he did it.
Jesus recruited a crew that was
motley,
far from the popular kids.
Yeah.
Right.
That's amazing. I'm curious how. So you do the music. Obviously, music. You have one of the prettiest voices, and I'm not microphone talk. You have one of the prettiest voices I've ever heard. But you reach a point, evangelical world, I'm worn out, burnout, don't want to be the leader, get that. So you come to the village, and we're going through transition in music. Did you feel a passion to lead worship? Were you trying to just see a need and meet it, and I could help them here? How did that work? And is it a passion for music in corporate worship kind of a thing?
Yeah. I love worship at the Village, and it's so different from the other worship contexts I've been in for many reasons. But the best way I can describe it is when I was doing worship in a giant setting, it was very technical. I mean, the truth of the matter is when the clock counts down,
Neil and I were talking about that.
Oh, you've got to start the track because, there's all these backing tracks. And as a keyboardist, that was part of my responsibility. And, service will begin in 5, 4, 3. And I'm thinking, okay, this song has 4 beats to come in and the drums have got to hit on 0. So we're down to 3, 1, click, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, in. And if we weren't in at 0, I mean,
train roll,
the whole production, you've got lights that are timed to the tracks that are timed to the timers. You're broadcasting this thing across the world. It has to be 59 minutes and 30 seconds because the parking team has to get, and the children's ministry has got to check all the kids out before they could check the next service in. It is a technical
I just have having anxiety attack just hearing this.
Truly, you've got to make it work. And being in the arts and being in production, there's a certain part of me that gets excited about making all the trains run on time. You go see a show and all the lights turn on and it's awesome. But that was a big piece of it. And even though I always felt like worship was spirit driven, you really in the back of your head had to be exceptionally technical, and everything was really feeling like a Broadway show. It's choreographed. At the Village, we don't always play the right notes. I don't always sing the right thing, but I am always connected, I feel, not only to God in that worship moment, but to the congregation. I mean, it's so special when you can hear people singing with you. But when I was in megachurch, we had in-ears. The only thing I heard was click, 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 click in my eardrum. I don't think I ever heard anybody in one of those churches singing because, you're so focused on the band and being in tune and all these things. But when you're at the Village and you can hear the person in the third row harmonizing with you, and when you are making an announcement and someone says like, amen, or at the end of a slow song where in evangelical world, we would have seamlessly transitioned with the fog into the second song. Somebody in the back row wants to clap, so everybody starts clapping and you can't help it, but people are able to be themselves and it doesn't feel choreographed in any way. So yeah, that's what I love about it. I really needed time to heal when I moved here to Atlanta, which is why I stopped doing the evangelical worship thing. But the Village came in at a moment that was perfect because I didn't feel like I had to recreate that environment. You had created an environment that was just very authentic, very people driven. And so that's why I feel like, if anything, Alejandro and I having the opportunity to help at the Village is more like ministry than it is about musical production.
It feels that way to me. And this is not knocking any music. We've been blessed with a lot of different music people down through the years, but you have always, it has felt like genuine ministry. Your desire to bring people in has been beautiful, and it has, you obviously, music, so you're able to bring in and make sure that it fits, and, you know how to do that, but you also have this, the importance of letting people belong and be a part of something. And so I think we had kind of gotten away from that a little bit. We had just kind of been, the people who did the thing knew how to do the thing, and they just would continue to do the thing, and they were gifted and precious and lovely and phenomenal. But you came along and said, I'm going to try to get some more people to participate. And so you began to call people out. And I just think that was a huge part of the last several years at the Village. That's been a really neat thing to watch. And I don't know if you realize what a big deal that has been.
Well, the truth is, there's some Sundays we're just making it happen, right, in real time. But what's been cool, and, I was always a part of churches where, the pastor might have had the sermon ready 12 months previous, or they had mapped out all of the sermon
I
series.
don't even understand that for what, I'm in awe, but I don't understand that.
No, and me either, but there was an expectation.
Right, I know, different work.
Programming, and that the music ministry had to fold in underneath that. What's been really cool is there's been a lot of Sundays we'll sing a song and Stan gets up. We had no idea what Stan was going to talk about, but it fits perfectly. Or somebody comes up and says, I don't know if you realize what I'm going through, but the lyrics of this song were just happen to be exactly what I needed. And we're not talking about a sea of 3,000 people. We're talking about in a group of 100 or less, somebody resonated so specifically
That's so true.
with a piece that to me feels really spirit driven. Like God has really had an opportunity to be in the mix. We had a guest at the Village a week or two ago. She came up on stage and sang with us, kind of in the moment, had never really even rehearsed with us. I don't know that could ever happen anywhere else. Certainly not somewhere that is so concerned with the technical aspect. But to me, that's what makes the Village like a family.
I had to unlearn some things and let go of some things, and I'm realizing it's better. What we're doing is better. It's being in the moment. Because even though I never had the mega, I've always been super time conscious. I had a lot of stuff. Neil and I were talking about that just today, and I'm learning just to breathe and just relax and experience the moment and feel the things you're saying. The amen in the back, and that somebody's touched somebody, or just to feel it. And to know that we're together, that's a very cool thing.
Well, the online community brings a whole nother flavor to it as well. We talk about when somebody walks through the door, we're excited to meet them. There are people walking through the door who have known the Village now for years.
That's a good point.
I'm talking years. They feel like they have an intimate connection with the Village. We have friends that will text us from other states that were like, "Oh, I liked the song you did. With the way Ray was talking this morning was great. I'd never thought about it that way." And so it really, in a world that is so, I don't know if hybrid's the right way to say it, but our digital lives and our real in-person lives are definitely blended. I think the Village is really exploring different scales of community in a way that most churches are staying really linear. Yeah, we might broadcast the service, but it's not as if there's a community of people that are being built and that feel connected to the in-person folks too. When they show up, they know our name and they know you, and that is unique. That's pretty cool.
Wow. I want to bring this to a close right now, because I've got 10 more things that I want to ask you. So I want to close this section.
Okay.
And just tell you that I've had a tear in my eye the entire time you've been talking. It is this, I want to join that church. I want to be a part of that. I want to spend my life as a part of that. Thank you. And I hope that, I can't wait to continue with you. I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you for watching. We hope this has been a help to you, and look for Matt Part 2. It's coming up, and it's going to be fantastic. Thanks for being a part of our online community.